The first time I made sourdough starter, I was clueless. Over the years, experience has taught me to lay some guidelines to make the process smooth and easy. Now I end up making fresh sourdough starter every year because I either gave it to family or somehow I used it all up. When building a fresh starter, I start with a glass cup or mini jar and finish in a storage jar. I have heard of people just using all-purpose flour and it works. I use whole flour with its fiber content plus all-purpose flour. This mixture has always given me a great starter. Whole grains make the sourdough starter more active quickly. Whichever flour you choose, go for whole grain. With time, I have seen that sourdough starter recipe is not a one-size-fits-all for the simple fact we have different hands and live in different climates. I make a fresh sourdough starter now without second guessing myself because of these guidelines. I always wondered why the fuss with using skills when it comes to sourdough. Since water weighs more than flour, using volume is out of the question. But here is a guide that helps me. The quantity of water can be half or three quarters or 100% the weight of the flour. All I do when using measuring spoons or cups is to go with the quantity of water instead. If my water is 1 tablespoon, I will double that with my flour. On the first day after 24 hours, every starter I make rises or increases in size. I would usually mix and leave for another 24 hours. It can be scary fermenting a food you've never done before at home. I believe every region has their own kind of fermented food of some sort, so I treat it like any other food I ferment. At the early stage, you will get a bit of a funky smell with a hint of fermenting notes. There should be no mold of any sort, either white film on top or darkish hairy kind. The next day or two may be silent, but activity is surely to pick up. Do not fret. I work from home and still create a schedule so I don't forget I have a starter to feed. On day 3, the starter has picked up activity. As the starter becomes active, the feeding time also changes. I am feeding a microbial community of wild yeast, so like anything that eats, it will grow, and not just in size but also in strength. That's why the hours before the next feed keep reducing, even when you're feeding the same quantity of starter and flour every day. Keep the feed the same, but reduce the quantity of starter. This will also make the starter stronger. Making a sourdough starter is like crafting your signature. It has a bit of your kitchen, climate, region, and definitely you. With a fresh starter, I continue to feed at least 2 weeks and at best 1 month to build strength before storing away. Here is to day 4, and the starter is doing pretty well. It's getting stronger and more bubbles. As it gets stronger, you see more bubbles, and that is a sure sign that the starter is doing perfectly well. When I make any changes in my starter, I patiently give it time to adjust. I finally learned that sourdough is forgiving. You can adjust with liquid or flour and it will bounce right back. I have succeeded in gaining a functioning community of wild yeast, so I will change my jars now and I will no longer throw away my discard. I will save my discard in another jar and then change the jars and cover after I feed. I usually get an active sourdough starter by day 10 that is functionally mature for baking bread. I love sourdough bread because it has a lower glycemic index than commercial bread. It is easier on my gut, I believe because of the hydration level of the flour and the fermentation. As I run out of feeding flour, I add only all-purpose flour to my storage container and fizzle out the whole wheat flour. I completely turn my starter into a white starter. A strong starter, when it's peaked, should not collapse easily. When I started eating sourdough bread, it wasn't a household bread in Nigeria, so I had no choice but to make mine. I remember going to buy a bread bag and I couldn't get anything to fit the bread. The shop owner asked what's the size I'm looking for. I decided to show rather than tell, and he said, "Na bread be this." I discovered sourdough for dieting, and now I am loving it.